from the Mercy One studio.
Support for Faith on Trial and Iowa Catholic Radio provided in part by Imogene Ingredients.
Our freedom of conscience and religion is being challenged by laws and regulations imposed by secular society. It's time to hear from the top Christian litigators in the nation who have come forward to tell us the truth and help us defend our faith.
Hear ye, hear ye. All rise. Faith on Trial with Defender of the Faith, Deacon Mike Mano, is in session.
And good Thursday morning from the Mercy One Studios in West Des Moines. I'm Deacon Mike Mano. I'm here in the studio with Gina Knoll. Gina, how are you this morning?
I'm well this morning. I made it here safe and sound.
Yeah.
I feel like every week we have a different kind of season going on outside.
That's right. Well, it's Iowa.
Today it's risk your life driving weather.
That's right. And we're both here well early.
Well, I wasn't sure if we were going to make it.
In here. Yeah.
You know, it's blowing. I have a crappy car. I don't have one of those big old SUVs, so I started out early, and I made it, and I had a little bit of time to relax before we started the show.
Got to meet the new station manager?
Yes, we have a new station manager.
Have a new station manager.
It's wonderful. Just in time for our annual season of giving.
That's right. That starts the end of this month. Yes. We're back in the Carathon business again.
So save your pennies, listeners.
Save your pennies.
We have a Carathon coming up.
We do. It's every 6 months. Looks like fall and spring is when we have our Carathons. And, you know, it takes a bit of money to run a radio station, you know, with all the electronic equipment we have and the people that we have here, the employees and everything. So think about that, pray about it, and be generous when you can in a couple of weeks when we call on you.
Would be a great idea.
That's right. Last week, if you remember, we were talking with Christopher Dotson, who was the General Counsel for the Catholic Conference in North Dakota.
That's right. About
this proposed bill that was in the North Dakota legislature that would remove the ministerial exception to mandatory reporting for priests in the confessional.
Right.
So if they heard something about child abuse or anything like that, that they had to report that to the police. And there were a lot of people that were up in arms about that. And a lot of Catholics from around the country were obviously concerned. I know the Catholic League was concerned, and there were letters written and phone calls made. And they had a hearing on that bill last week. What happened was the sponsor withdrew the bill. And so it's no longer under consideration in North Dakota.
So they had the hearing, because in Nebraska they said that anytime legislation is introduced, it can't be buried.
Right.
It needs to have a hearing.
Need to have a hearing on the floor. This was withdrawn before it got to the floor.
Okay.
So, and it was the chief sponsor. We know that from...
So do you think it was the hearing that had them concerned about that?
I'm not sure it was a hearing or not, because when I went to look for the hearing, I didn't find it. And I was wondering if something had happened, and maybe
they
it happened
withdrew
before.
it before the hearing actually took place?
What had happened was the three sponsors... One of the sponsors already withdrew his sponsorship when we talked to Christopher Dotson last week, because he didn't realize the full impact of the bill. And then,
which often happens with legislation. The way it's written, it can have unintended consequences when someone reads it very closely.
That's right. And the titles of the bills, and we've talked about this before, the sponsors of these bills want to put the best face on it, so they name them really nice things like the Equality
vocabulary
Act.
Matters.
Yeah, and who would object to the Equality Act? Well, read the darn thing, and there's a lot to object to in there. It's certainly not an Equality Act, not from a Christian perspective. But anyway.
And really, the legislation in North Dakota, as it stands today, makes priests mandatory reporters no matter what.
Right.
Just excluding the confessional.
Right. Well, that's and you know, you have so many priests that are in parishes that have schools, you know, so they're part of the school program and everything, and they are mandatory reporters. But if they hear something in the confessional, they're excused from that because of the seal of the confession. And it's like, you know, attorney-client privilege. You know,
a little bit, yes.
I can't disclose what a client has told me. Now, the difference, of course, is, and we mentioned this a little last week, if the client allows me to speak on that, I can.
Right.
Because then they're waiving their privilege. But in the priest penitent thing, the penitent can't waive it.
Even if they waive it, the priest still cannot reveal
because the canon law binds the priest to
confessional
death on that. He cannot reveal what was said, and he can't even reveal the fact that somebody made a confession.
Right.
Okay. So and that obviously should be comforting to those of us who are sinners. That when we go, now you look at me funny that you're not a sinner, right?
All a sinner? Yeah, isn't that all of us?
When we go to the confessional and we seek to, receive reconciliation from the church and from Christ, that isn't going any further. You know, nobody's going to tell my wife what I said in the confessional, or my neighbor, or my business partner, or whatever. That doesn't go anywhere. And actually, the priests that I've talked to about this, most of them say it goes in one ear and out the other. You know, I mean, they hear so many confessions, they've learned over the years just to forget them.
Well, hopefully they're hearing a lot more.
I
every day.
I hope they are.
Yes.
I hope they are. All right.
For a better country.
We have.
What about today?
We have an interesting program today. Alex Schandenberg, who is the executive director of the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition up in Canada, good friend of the program. He's been on many times before. And we're going to talk about some updates in the movement for assisted suicide and euthanasia. And, of course, if you want to know about what's going on in this field, Alex is the person to talk to because he keeps tabs on this stuff around the world. And then we have Ashley McGuire, who has been on the program several times. She's a senior fellow with the Catholic Association. She's author of a book called Sex Scandal, Drive to Abolish Male and Female. And we're going to talk to her today specifically about that book.
Yeah, I had a chance to read it, and it's an encyclopedia for all of us, yes.
And so it will be very interesting to look at it from her perspective as an author here. Do you have a prayer that we can start off with here?
I do. The prayer for peace from our Pope Benedict. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. God of peace, bring your peace to our violent world, peace in the hearts of all men and women, and peace among the nations of this earth. Turn to your way of love those whose hearts and minds are consumed with hatred. Strengthen us in hope and give us the wisdom and courage to work tirelessly for a world where true peace and love reign among the nations and in the hearts of all. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Gina. And Gina and I will be back in just a couple of minutes after these messages with Alex Schandenberg.
Thank you, Blessman International, for their support of Iowa Catholic Radio. Everyone lives their life 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. How we use that time directly affects if our life will leave a significant impact or not. Each year, Blessman International leads Central Iowans on a 12-day, all-inclusive experience sharing the heart of Christ with children in South Africa. Teams are forming to do something significant in an African child's life. Learn more at blessmaninternational.org. That's blessmaninternational.org.
Is it time for a new roof? Then it could be time for you to get to know Bell Construction. Bell Construction is a roofing company entering its 30th year of business. They specialize in residential re-roofs, light commercial jobs, and have the experience to meet all of your roofing needs with personal service. With Bell Construction, the owner will come to your home or place of business in person to inspect and ensure the quality of work that you deserve. They pride themselves in working with you on a personal basis and making sure you are satisfied. Bell Construction, 515-963-4494.
What is the best gift ever? Giving a Catholic education is at the top of my list. Your contribution to CTO helps families send their children to our Catholic schools who otherwise could not afford it. In giving to CTO, you receive the best tax credits ever. Pledge or donate online at ctoiowa.org. The bottom line, it's for the kids and their future.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and Dowling Catholic Sports is provided in part by Ashworth Vision Clinic. With 2 licensed optometrists, Barbara Sheets, a Dowling graduate, and Dr. Craig Harper, the Ashworth Vision Clinic team provides complete eye exams, contact lenses, glasses, glaucoma testing, and pre- and post-operative care. Ashworth Vision Clinic is located at 60th and Ashworth in West Des Moines. 515-440-4610 or online, ashworthvision.com.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and Catholic Women Now provided in part by Permar Security, providing security solutions for homes and businesses since 1953. Permar Security is a Catholic-owned family business supplying security systems, access control systems, video surveillance, fire alarm systems, and video doorbells. All alarm systems are monitored out of their monitoring center located in the state of Iowa. Permar Security, 515-244-5660, permarsecurity.com.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and Faith on Trial provided by Paul Martin and Paul Mitchell, owners of Imogene Ingredients. Imogene Ingredients supply specialized feed ingredients for livestock and pet diets to improve maternal and young animal health in both conventional and organic production. Well, welcome back. Gina and I are here in the studio, and we're just connecting with Alex Schandenberg, Executive Director of the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition. Alex, did we get you?
I'm here, absolutely.
Okay, very good.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us again. It's always a pleasure to have you. Not always a pleasure to talk to you about what we have to talk to you about.
I don't know how you do what you do.
What do we want to cover today exactly?
Well, first of all, I want to talk a little bit about this a hospice facility that was taken over by the government there.
Right, the Delta Hospice.
Delta Hospital, right.
The end is coming very soon for them, yes.
You want to give us...
And then I want to talk about assisted suicide, what's going on in the U.S. right now.
Sure, we want to talk about that too, but let's talk about the Delta House for a few minutes.
Delta Hospice, absolutely. Yeah.
What was the story behind
Who
that?
Who are they? Yeah.
The government is shutting them down because they refuse to kill. The government has defunded them, their 10-bed hospice, because they refuse to kill their patients.
Last we checked in with them, they're a private organization, and the government in Canada was coming in to take over their facility because they refused to allow assisted suicide. Right.
The government is also planning to expropriate their building. The issue is that the building is on the government land, but they built the building themselves. So the Delta Hospice is a private organization. They raised the money themselves to build the building, but because the land was given to them to put the hospice on, the land is owned by the government. Therefore, the government's going to expropriate the building.
Now, as I recall, there's a hospital across the street, is there not, that does perform physician-assisted suicide and euthanasia?
That's correct. The hospital right across the street. So I don't have to like it, but the fact is no one's being denied euthanasia. I'm not happy about that, but it's easily obtained right across the street. The reason they're shutting down the Delta Hospice is because the Delta Hospice has been willing to speak out against euthanasia and tell them that they're not going to do it. And because they've been vocal about it, they've been the ones who've been made as the example. And the other thing, of course, is that means all the other hospices are now silent because they're all afraid that the same thing will happen to them. So having the one example, it's the same thing as the Jewish leaders say, crucify Jesus. So one death is going to be done for the purpose of protecting the people from the Romans. Is how that was thought of. Well, this is the same idea. We're going to pick on the Delta Hospice because they're the loudmouths. We're going to make an example of them, and we're going to take it right to the end where we even expropriate their building, and all the rest will now fall in line, and that's what's going on.
So it's a way to expand euthanasia and assisted suicide into the
Well,
hospices.
it certainly expands, but in this case, as I say, and as you know, this doesn't actually provide any expansion because the Delta Hospice wasn't willing to allow it to be done on their property or by their people in any way, shape, or form. But if you wanted it that bad, they would transfer you. They wouldn't do it, but they would transfer you. So if you were insisting, they were not saying you can't have it. They were saying, we're not doing it. We're not part of it. So they were transferring them to the hospital, or if someone wanted to die at home, they were transferring them home and saying, we have nothing to do with it, but if you don't want to be here because of this, we will move you. And they were doing that. So no one was actually being denied euthanasia whatsoever.
So a family that wanted to protect a loved one from the manipulations that are involved, and I would say that in many cases it is a sort of psychological manipulation.
Correct, yeah.
Especially with government health care, you're almost led to believe that this is the next step. But for families that wanted to protect their loved ones from the euthanasia, the Delta Hospice was available to them, and they knew that their loved ones would be safe.
Absolutely. The Delta Hospice was a safe space. And what's happening here is that there are other safe spaces, but slowly but surely there'll be no safe spaces because the government, now remember, this is a provincial government, not a federal government, so these things vary based on where you live.
Okay.
So as an example, in Manitoba passed a bill in 2017 giving conscience rights to medical professionals, etc., which would mean that people working at the Delta Hospice would simply say, we want nothing to do with this. And in Manitoba, in that province, they would be protected.
Okay.
If you want nothing to do with it, that's fine.
But their care, and I know we'll move to the United States, but their care is under, at least the medical care is under a national health care plan.
Well, it's all provincial. So in Canada,
it's not a
it's all provincial. So it does vary between provinces.
Okay.
So I'm in Ontario, and that's British Columbia. And obviously that is a bit of an issue because if you live in, let's say, Newfoundland, which is a poorer province, the level of health care would be a little bit less because they have less resources.
Okay.
All right, let's turn to the United States. There's some stuff going on now with assisted suicide proposals across the United States, and you, I know, have your finger on top of these. You can lay some of those out.
The assisted suicide lobby right now is pushing hard to expand the assisted suicide laws as well as to get more states to pass this. So what we see is there's a bill in Washington State. So Washington State passed assisted suicide by a plebiscite so that was passed in 2007. The plebiscite, it came into place in 2008, and now they're expanding their assisted suicide regime by taking away what we call the basic safeguards. So, for instance, the 15-day waiting period is being reduced to 72 hours, and then at the same time, what's happening is they're saying, but if someone's actually nearing death, we will waive the waiting period completely. They're also expanding who can do the act. So currently the law says only doctors can do the act. And so this is saying, well, then also physician assistants. So they're redefining it as a qualified medical provider, which also includes physician assistants and registered nurses. So by expanding who can do the act or who can prescribe and approve assisted suicide, they're actually making it more available, because one of the problems with assisted suicide by the pro-assisted suicide people, not a lot of doctors actually want to do it. They're not participating. So by getting the other thing about the waiting period is very important is that if there's no waiting period for someone, you have what you call a same-day death. So you have to think this through. That on a bad day, so let's say someone hears that their prognosis has been downgraded and it's upsetting to them. That day, they could then ask for assisted suicide, and if they're qualified, they could die the same day. There's no chance to rethink it. And we think about all this data that we have about the will to live, and human beings, we tend to change our mind about death if our time is approaching. And there's been quite a few studies done on that, asking people, would you want to die? And they say yes today, and then tomorrow they say absolutely not. Now, what changed their mind about it, of course, is they had a better day, or they had their grandchildren come visit them, and everything changed. But at the same time, we're seeing a bill in New Mexico right now, which is actually quite extreme. So what New Mexico's assisted suicide bill, now New Mexico has not legalized assisted suicide, so this is a legislation to legalize it. But what their bill is doing is it's basically mirroring the Washington State expansion bill, but to legalize it that way in the beginning. So right off the bat, you have that it could be done not just by physicians, but by physician assistants, etc. When I'm saying this, you have to think about this. As much as assisted suicide is a horrific idea, because you're actually giving physicians or physician assistants the right in law to cause someone's death or to be involved with causing someone's death, we're talking about lethal drugs here. Mm-hmm. So you're going to give the physician assistant the right to be involved with prescribing lethal controlled substances to someone to cause their death. You're lowering the level of the whole question of who can actually be involved with killing. This is a very serious question, even if you think of it from that basic point of view. So New Mexico has got a pretty extreme bill, whereas other states like Arizona, their bills are not so extreme, because what they're saying is that Arizona is not likely to pass assisted suicide, so we'll come in with a tighter worded bill, and then hopefully 2 or 3 years down the road, we'll expand it. Which brings me to Hawaii. Hawaii's got an assisted suicide expansion bill also. Hawaii only legalized assisted suicide 2 years ago. So it's only been in place for a very short period of time. They're doing the same thing as in Washington State. They're reducing the waiting period, and they for someone who's actually nearing death, they're eliminating the waiting period, allowing for a same-day death, and they're allowing nurses, etc., to be involved with assisted suicide. So they're widening who can do it, when it can be done, and how quick it can be done. Obviously, that's saying there's nothing and all questionable about assisted suicide, and they're widening it. Hawaii should jump out at you, as I say, because they only legalized it 2 years ago, and now they're expanding it already. And it gets down to the whole philosophy of the assisted suicide lobby. They try and bring in a bill into a state, and they're selling you on the safeguards. And I say the safeguards are the flag that they're waving to say to you that, oh, it's okay, go ahead, legalize assisted killing. It's okay. Do so. We will have safeguards to protect you. And then, of course, their intention is not for those safeguards to protect you. The safeguards are there so they can pass the law. Right. And then what happens is down the line, they start removing the safeguards.
And the broadening of it is not just in the waiting periods and the rest. It's defining the individuals that have this available to them. Are they persons that are near death, or are they someone suffering from depression?
Well, that's what's happening in Canada right now. Just in my country, we've got legal euthanasia, and now euthanasia is a little different than assisted suicide, but as I say, they're two birds of a feather that flock together. They're actually the same thing, but it's done in a different way, right? Mm-hmm. So with euthanasia, it's done by lethal injection, whereas assisted suicide is done by prescribing the lethal drugs, and the person takes it themselves. So the drugs are the same, but the act is done, in the case of euthanasia, by the physician, lethal injection. Now remember, lethal injection is a form of homicide.
In the United States.
So when you look at the Canadian law, for instance, it created, to legalize euthanasia, they created an exception to the Homicide Act. So at least they're honest about that. Mm-hmm. They're saying, yes, this is a homicide, but we'll allow doctors to kill people under these circumstances. But in fact, that's what they're debating right now in Canada, the whole issue of depression. Now, the problem with the question of depression is that it actually seeps into your regular assisted suicide laws already anyway, because somebody who's going through a lot of difficult health conditions, it's normal as a human being. Remember, we're talking about human beings, and what does it mean to be human? It's normal for a human being to go through that dark time of their life when they're experiencing difficult health conditions. It's normal. It's normal that someone who might be going through difficult health conditions, that doesn't mean that they're experiencing great physical pain, but they might be experiencing existential pain or psychological pain. They might be dealing with a lot of issues in an emotional and psychological sense. And this is why they're actually asking for death. So now you're saying yes to them that they can die, but it's not because they're actually wanting to die per se because they're suffering. It's because of the fact that they need good care, and they're not getting it. And they won't get it because, of course, they've asked for assisted suicide, and if the doctor looks at them and say, oh, well, I guess you qualify, well, death comes before any type of treatment comes. And this is what does go on. Now, the whole issue also of Portugal. Portugal, it's very sad because they've, just a couple of years ago, there was a euthanasia bill in Portugal that was resoundingly defeated. Now the Portuguese parliament has passed a euthanasia bill. It was passed on January 29th. And so what's going on right now is we're urging people to contact the Portuguese president because he has the ability to veto this bill. And he's a Catholic man. He's someone who says he's Catholic, who goes to church, who identifies as Catholic, President de Souza. And he recently won his presidential election on January 24th by an overwhelming margin, so he doesn't even have to worry about an election coming up. He just was reelected on January 24th. He can veto this bill, and he should veto this bill. This is a terrible bill. What happened in Portugal is they have an extreme left-wing government currently in place, and it's them, of course, who are in control, and they've legalized euthanasia. And this euthanasia also applies to psychiatric suffering, this bill in Portugal. So this is very similar to what we call the Canadian law, which is pretty extreme.
Which allows most. Now, as a Catholic, we have the moral understanding of the life given to us by God from conception to natural death. But there are, we do understand that there are end-of-life palliative care means to care for our dying.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so the fact of it is that the argument that assisted suicide is not necessary is an absolutely accurate argument. We can care for someone's pain and symptoms. If someone is in so much pain, there's nothing morally wrong to put them into a type of a sleep right, to sedate them, as long as they're sedated in such a way that we're not actually killing them. So the question about pain and suffering, well, that can be properly dealt with. Nonetheless, I always say that part of the problems is that we get a little bit lazy sometimes when arguing against assisted suicide, because we say, well, it's unnecessary, and then we leave it at that, when in fact the biggest argument is that this is about actually killing someone. This is actually about, they say it's about suicide, but in fact it's not per se. Suicide is not justified anyway. That's not the point. The point, if it is that you're actually giving the doctors the right in law to be directly involved with causing someone's death. They're getting the right in law to intentionally prescribe lethal cocktails of drugs, knowingly that you're going to take it to have your life ended. That is a serious, powerful question, and to give physicians that right in law should never happen. I believe it's absolutely wrong to ever give someone the right to cause my death. It's that simple, or to cause your death. And it's really that simple when it comes down to it. And what is the outcome of that? Well, it expands, but also the outcome is that we dehumanize ourselves. We recognize that we forget what it means to be human, and we dehumanize our nature as a human person because we're allowing somebody else to be involved with killing us. That's serious. That's very serious. Now, all these other arguments are correct also. You know, we don't allow capital punishment in most states because of the fact that they say, well, we have fear that it'll be abused. Well, it's also that you're giving the state the power to kill someone, right? Well, in the same way here, you're giving the physician now the power to kill someone. This is completely, in many sense, you would say this is a crazy idea. Historically, we've seen what's happened when you give someone the right in law to kill someone.
Clearly immoral.
Why are we doing so now again? And I understand people fear pain. I get it completely. Nonetheless, it doesn't justify killing.
In some places, they're allowing euthanasia for children, and I noticed in a letter that you sent out to your supporters that the Deputy Prime Minister in the Netherlands, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Health, announced that their intention to extend the euthanasia law to children after their upcoming election. How many countries are allowing the euthanasia of children now?
Well, currently it's only Belgium, but the Netherlands already allows a type of child euthanasia. It allows euthanasia of newborns. They have something called the Groningen Protocol. So the Groningen Protocol was developed quite a few years ago because the law in the Netherlands does not allow euthanasia for people who are under the age of 12. So how the law in the Netherlands works is that you're not allowed to have euthanasia if you're under the age of 12. Between the ages of 12 and 16, it requires parental consent. And after 16, because 16 is considered the age of adult in the Netherlands, so after the age of 16, euthanasia is then available to anyone. Now, so to extend child euthanasia in the Netherlands, what the Dutch Health Minister, Hugo de Jong, is suggesting is he's actually saying, well, I don't actually want to change the Dutch legislation. What we'll do is we'll extend this Groningen Protocol, which was developed for euthanasia for newborns. Now, let's be brutally honest. The Groningen Protocol is about eugenics. It's about a child born with disabilities. They say it's about suffering, but if you actually read it, it actually has three different categories that it allows euthanasia for. Those children who are going to die anyway. The second category is those children who, if they survive, are going to suffer. And the third category is possible future suffering. So it's eugenics. You have a child with spina bifida, and you didn't want a child with spina bifida. You have a child with whatever condition, you didn't want a child with, you wanted your perfect child. So therefore the law allowed to kill that child.
What kind of chatter is there in the United States about child either euthanasia or assisted suicide?
Well, let me tell you, there hasn't been a court case yet, but let me tell you, in Oregon you've had assisted suicide in place for quite a long time. And the Oregon law requires you to be a competent adult. So you have to be at least 18 years old, and you have to be competent, and you have to be capable of consenting. That's how the law is defined. But it seems to me that that is an inequality in the law. That means that if you were a 17-year-old competent person, or a 16-year-old competent person, or a 13-year-old competent person, you're being denied what you could have if you were 18. I think that there's a court case there. The reason they legalize it with these restrictions to say 18 is because that's what the average person would say, well, at least that sounds reasonable, right? But if you allow it for a child, a lot of people would say, well, that's unreasonable. But once it's in place, now the argument is, how could you deny suffering to the child? That's what's going to be argued. So someday there will be a court case in Oregon or Washington State or one of these places which will challenge the law, saying you are forcing this 16-year-old with cancer to suffer. And that argument would make sense because you've already allowed the killing to occur. You've changed the laws to say it's okay for physicians to be involved with killing their patients under these circumstances. So now the only question is, who are we going to be involved with killing?
Yeah, the camel has its nose in the tent already.
That's right. So why wouldn't you allow it for children? So the question is not whether it should be allowed for children. The question is whether it should be allowed at all. That's the question at hand. Because if you're going to allow this, eventually there'll be a circumstance which seems unreasonable not to allow it to the child.
Alex, we're running out of time now. You have a website that people can follow you and see what's going on in this area?
Yeah, the website is it's Euthanasia Prevention Coalition. Since I'm in Canada, it's epcc.ca. Okay. epcc.ca. You can also Google me for my blog. But right now, or this weekend, we're offering a free viewing of our award-winning Fatal Flaws film. So if you go to epcc.ca or you email me at info@epcc.ca, I'll be happy to send you a link for a free viewing of the film Fatal Flaws this weekend. And the Fatal Flaws film looks at the Netherlands and it looks at the state of Oregon. So the Netherlands euthanasia law and the Oregon assisted suicide law. And that's what it looks at, and it shows people what is actually happening in those places.
Alex, thank you for joining us again today. We'll keep in touch with you because this seems to be kind of a fast-moving thing right now. And
right now it's a bit of a cancer that needs to be stomped on.
Yeah, it's metastasizing, and we need to stop it. Alex, thank you very much for joining us. Alex Schandenberg, who is Executive Director of the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition. We're going to take a short break right now, and Gina and I will be back in just a few minutes. You're listening to Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio.
What is the best gift ever? Giving a Catholic education is at the top of my list. Your contribution to CTO helps families send their children to our Catholic schools who otherwise could not afford it. In giving to CTO, you receive the best tax credits ever. Pledge or donate online at ctoiowa.org. The bottom line, it's for the kids and their future.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and Dowling Catholic Sports is provided in part by Ashworth Vision Clinic. With 2 licensed optometrists, Barbara Sheets, a Dowling graduate, and Dr. Craig Harper, the Ashworth Vision Clinic team provides complete eye exams, contact lenses, glasses, glaucoma testing, and pre- and post-operative care. Ashworth Vision Clinic is located at 60th and Ashworth in West Des Moines. 515-440-4610 or online, ashworthvision.com.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and Catholic Women Now provided in part by Permar Security, providing security solutions for homes and businesses since 1953. Permar Security is a Catholic-owned family business supplying security systems, access control systems, video surveillance, fire alarm systems, and video doorbells. All alarm systems are monitored out of their monitoring center located in the state of Iowa. Permar Security, 515-244-5660, permarsecurity.com.
Thank you, Dental Associates, for underwriting Dowling Catholic Sports 365. With over 40 years' experience, Dental Associates is a group dental practice with the mission of promoting optimum health and well-being to all patients, providing preventative, restorative, and cosmetic dentistry for the entire family. Message underwritten by Dr. Kenton Gleichman, Dr. Steve Karbaka, and Dr. Ben Nagel. Dental Associates, addressing your smile, needs, and dreams. Online at DesMoinesDentalAssociates.com.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and John Leonetti in the morning is provided by Five Sons Naturescapes. Five Sons Naturescapes is a Catholic veteran-owned family company providing premium outdoor landscaping, clean up and restore outdoor living space with retaining walls, privacy fencing, pergolas, paver sidewalks, and patios. Issues with soil settling and water around the foundation and yard? Five Sons Naturescapes can grade and install drainage tile to help. Five Sons Naturescapes online at fivesonsnaturescapes.com.
Here's your forecast on Iowa Catholic Radio. We have a cold front moving through this afternoon. Our temperature will be falling into the low 20s and wind gusting at 35 miles per hour with snow showers. Clearing up tonight and getting cold with our low near 10 and windy. Then we're back to sunshine tomorrow, but it will stay chilly, our high around 20. The weather is brought to you by Divine Treasures, a Catholic book and gift store serving the Des Moines community for over 25 years. I'm meteorologist Steve Hamilton on Iowa Catholic Radio.
And you're listening to Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio. Ashley McGuire is a senior fellow at the Catholic Association. She's been on our program several times to talk about issues of the day. She's also the author of a book, Sex Scandal, The Drive to Abolish Male and Female. And we'd like this time, Ashley, to talk to you about that book and what you found out about the confusion now that some people have between male and female.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. I wrote the book, almost 4 years ago. It's hard to believe. And it's been sort of stunning to me to see how quickly this issue has really accelerated. So, for example, I talk a lot about women's sports and the way that all of the gains that have been made in women's sports over the last several decades are quickly starting to be erased because of this idea that there's no difference between the sexes, and therefore, even biological males who self-identify as males were competing against women in sports. The bottom line thesis of my book is that when we deny the reality of sexual difference, women are the biggest losers. And I think, sports is just one example where we're really seeing that play out every day in a more pronounced way in our culture.
You laid it out from the very beginning excellently. And I read the book, and I couldn't believe that it was 4 years old already. It is so spot on with how the evolution to the point that we're at today became. And I really thought, this is not just a book that opens our eyes. It's an encyclopedia of exactly the culture changes that are coming to force. So for our listeners who are interested in reading it, we talk about a lot of legal cases on this show that defy natural law when it comes to gender and sexuality. And I think this book is very helpful in describing how we got to those legal cases.
Well, thank you. And that's really something that I try to do, because I think a lot of people are sort of like, how did I wake up and suddenly women are going to be drafted for the military? That was something that came out in the middle of the pandemic. I got kind of lost. But the congressional committee that was formed to look into that recommended that we now include women in the selective service registration. So, if they follow,
you have a whole chapter on that. If they should have read it before they made those decisions.
Well, and I just think so many people are sort of like, whoa, how did we get to this point? And you really have to go back. In the book, I argue to sort of second wave feminism, where you see this sort of pivot to arguing that sex is a construct, gender is a construct, and that the way that women can be equal with men is by being like men. And so that's where I think it starts, and then it's just sort of gone off the rails to the point that you have just this really egregious denial of reality, of science. I find it so ironic. I live in this neighborhood where everybody has these signs in their yards that say science is real, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, the most basic biological science is being denied before our faces, and the costs are really staggering.
Right. I'm glad you brought up the cost. I was very interested in the stories and the highlights of our government agencies trying to bring women into the workforce as firefighters. The amount of money that was spent to try to help them train and become as equipped as they needed to be to keep up and actually be able to carry the equipment and meet the timing restraints and all the rest that men are better physically, biologically to accommodate. It really highlighted, the training was like at $80,000 a woman, and many of them couldn't make it out of the training. Oh, and then on top of it, they were injured when they were, forcing these women into inequality. The OSHA fines that were over the top, and the disability payments to the women who were injured because they were put in a position of not being physically able to withstand the demands of that profession.
Right, and the findings were pretty similar for women in combat, that not only does it further risk the lives of male soldiers, but women were significantly more likely to be injured and die. And the question I keep asking throughout the book, and that I'm still asking 4 years later, is how is that creating equality for women? I'm all for finding ways to better include women in all aspects of civil society, including the military. I think in the book I talk about ways where women really do have an advantage. Things like, diplomatic processes, going into some of these Afghani villages where, people, women have a skill set that men don't. But this idea that women somehow aren't equal to men, can't be equal to men, if physically we can't do the same things as them, that's really become such an impairment, I think, on our pursuit for authentic sexual equality, because again, it's holding women to a male standard and saying, as long as women can't, climb up, 20 flights of stairs carrying 100 pounds of, hose and ladder on their back, they're not going to be equal to men in the firefighting world. Well, if we're hung up on that, that's just not, there's things that we can't change. What we can do is look at what makes us different, what are our strengths, and how can we create society in such a way that protects women where they're weak, where they're vulnerable? And I talk a lot about things like paid family leave and better appreciation for the fact that it is women who uniquely carry the burden of bearing children, and our laws need to better reflect that. And then also, finding ways to better utilize where women have strengths that men don't. I talk a lot about the business world and the finance world and the fact that, the more companies that include women, they tend to do better in terms of not making bad, risky investments, because women sort of see the field in a different way than men don't. They tend not to take some of the same aggressive risks, financial risks that men do. And it's just become so toxic to even talk about that. And I think as long as that is toxic, we're never really going to get anywhere in terms of authentic sexual equality.
Yeah, and I think you see a lot these days with the language being used, too. I notice expectant mothers are now birthing individuals. Is that what this has come to?
And how is that not demeaning? The irony, and this is the point that I make over and over and over again in the book, is gender neutrality ultimately ends up costing women more, because the cost of denying the most basic biological reality that even cave people would have understood, which is that women are the ones who have children, is that somehow we have to be reduced to some sort of a weird objectified physical status. It actually is turning us into baby factories by calling us things like birthing individuals or pregnant people. The phrase pregnant people is now, I think, the accepted terminology that you see used in, medical language, things like that. And how is that not objectifying? And I will say that, I talk about this in the book, and I think this is still the case, that you are seeing an interesting alignment between, more conservative people who have been lamenting this, and then really sort of left-wing radical feminists who are arguing that this is what they call erasing women. And it's completely true. Look at what happened with the House of Representatives just a few weeks ago when they passed a measure basically eliminating what they call gendered language. What happened is you have words like mother and woman and sister being eliminated from the language. And so then how can you talk about the gains that women make if you can't even refer to a woman as a woman?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
you did a very good job in the book, and highly recommend our listeners to read it, because the evolution and the evolution on our college campuses, which now is leaking back down into our elementary and high schools, but the tug of war between the administration, Harvard, really, I was surprised to find that Harvard defended allowing women to have their safe spaces, and yet they were forced into a situation of having to neutralize every space, the dorms, the bathrooms, the clubs. They had to be equal to all genders. And
right. Well,
liberalism
is the double.
Yeah, go ahead. Discuss that for a bit.
Yeah, it's the double-edged sword of this sort of ideology, which is, you know, you want to have safe spaces for women. Then what do you do? And this is an increasing problem where domestic violence shelters are being sued because they don't allow biological men in. So these are women who've just been sexually assaulted by a biological male. They are forced to be on the defense. You know, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the woman who popularized the term on the basis of sex, she argued that absolutely women should have privacy, that women have a right to privacy, you know, their own sort of pro-choice language, and that they should have, you know, private spaces. And that is sort of being cannibalized by this new gender ideology, which, you know, again, to my point that women are the losers, it's like, you know, you can't have it both ways. You can't have safe spaces for women and deny that women are a distinct biological entity at the same time, because what's going to happen is men are going to invade those safe spaces. And then the crazy thing, and this is what's just so crazy, is that those women, including women who've been, you know, victimized in various ways, they are actually being accused of discrimination on the basis of sex and gender.
Mm-hmm.
So this is,
you
know,
cited a court
the
case where the
issue.
judge, the judge came out against the woman who was assaulted on that basis.
What do you see, Ashley, right now as the future for women's athletics? And we're running out of time here, so we don't have much time to answer the question, but can you project ahead a little bit where women's sports are going?
In a terrible direction. It's absolutely tragic. You know, you have the president who just signed this executive order that basically obliterates women's sports. And, you know, I was an athlete in high school, and being able to get some of those, you know, I was never somebody who was going to get like a scholarship to college, but this is going to have real costs for women when, you know, there's, you know, 3 spots that are recognized in a meet, and that, you know, one of those spots is cost, you know, a man takes that from a woman, taking scholarships. So and then you have, you know, women athletes who were pioneers in their field speaking out against this, being lambasted and shredded in the media. Mm-hmm. I don't see how the future of women's sports can look good.
Ashley, I think the book can be found on Amazon, and I checked with our local Catholic bookstore here in Des Moines, Divine Treasures, and I believe they may be able to order it. If any of our listeners are wanting to read the book, we'd certainly recommend it to you. Ashley, thank you for joining us this morning. We certainly appreciate it, and we will probably have you back on other topics in your role as senior fellow at the Catholic Association.
And all our prayers
thanks
for you.
Thanks for having me on.
Yes. Thank you. Our prayers go with you. Thank you, Ashley. This is Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio, and Gene and I will be back in a few minutes right after these messages.
What is the best gift ever? Giving a Catholic education is at the top of my list. Your contribution to CTO helps families send their children to our Catholic schools who otherwise could not afford it. In giving to CTO, you receive the best tax credits ever. Pledge or donate online at ctoiowa.org. The bottom line, it's for the kids and their future.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and Dowling Catholic Sports is provided in part by Ashworth Vision Clinic. With 2 licensed optometrists, Barbara Sheets, a Dowling graduate, and Dr. Craig Harper, the Ashworth Vision Clinic team provides complete eye exams, contact lenses, glasses, glaucoma testing, and pre- and post-operative care. Ashworth Vision Clinic is located at 60th and Ashworth in West Des Moines. 515-440-4610 or online, ashworthvision.com.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and Catholic Women Now provided in part by Permar Security, providing security solutions for homes and businesses since 1953. Permar Security is a Catholic-owned family business supplying security systems, access control systems, video surveillance, fire alarm systems, and video doorbells. All alarm systems are monitored out of their monitoring center located in the state of Iowa. Permar Security, 515-244-5660, permarsecurity.com.
Thank you, Dental Associates, for underwriting Dowling Catholic Sports 365. With over 40 years' experience, Dental Associates is a group dental practice with the mission of promoting optimum health and well-being to all patients, providing preventative, restorative, and cosmetic dentistry for the entire family. Message underwritten by Dr. Kenton Gleichman, Dr. Steve Karbaka, and Dr. Ben Nagel. Dental Associates, addressing your smile, needs, and dreams. Online at DesMoines-DentalAssociates.com.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and John Leonetti in the morning is provided by Five Sons Naturescapes. Five Sons Naturescapes is a Catholic veteran-owned family company providing premium outdoor landscaping, clean up and restore outdoor living space with retaining walls, privacy fencing, pergolas, paver sidewalks, and patios. Issues with soil settling and water around the foundation and yard? Five Sons Naturescapes can grade and install drainage tile to help. Five Sons Naturescapes online at fivesonsnaturescapes.com.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and Faith on Trial provided by Paul Martin and Paul Mitchell, owners of Imogene Ingredients. Imogene Ingredients supply specialized feed ingredients for livestock and pet diets to improve maternal and young animal health in both conventional and organic production. Information about Pharmatan and other products at imogeneingredients.com. Paul and Paul are members of St. Augustine's Knights of Columbus and encourage their brother knights to keep standing for their faith. And welcome back. You're listening to Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio. Gina, interesting program again today. I hate using those words all the time, interesting program, but that's what they seem to come out as.
Well, I enjoy learning about all that is happening. It's hard to even keep track because some of the issues that we bring to the show are not popular in terms of being broadcast through major media sources. Right. So euthanasia is always interesting to me to see the growth and the creep into our society.
You know what it reminds me of? Remember how fast we saw same-sex marriage take hold?
Sure.
And it was, 15 years ago, you'd laugh at that concept. Now it's everywhere. This euthanasia and physicians-assisted suicide appear to me to be following kind of the same track, that it's gaining acceptance more and more places, which is going to cause problems down the line.
I've seen it, especially in Medicare situations where it's always a financial restraint that allows the doctors to make certain cases that hasten the death of an individual. But once they get comfortable with that, I think that it's just very easy to fall into this euthanasia and then death by lethal injection.
Yeah, I think so. And then with the sex scandal, or whatever, the sex scandal, the book.
Right.
What Ashley is talking about, obviously, is countercultural because we're seeing that change, too. We're seeing more and more acceptance of transgender individuals and everything. And now that they're actually engaged in things that women are engaged in, too, and they can do it better because they're stronger, like athletics. I'm afraid that everything that women have gained under Title IX are going to be lost in a couple of years because of this, especially the president's, Mr. Biden's executive order and that.
Well, I would highly recommend that all of our listeners get a copy of that book, because it's an encyclopedia for almost every issue in terms of gender that we address daily. And the arguments are there, and the first half of the book is clearly well written. It's historical, it's argumentative, it's definitive. And then the second half of the book is literally 100 pages plus of the references that she used to derive these opinions, the facts, and the sites that help us make these arguments.
Right. Now, the book was published a couple of years ago, so it may not be current in all the bookstores right now, but I did talk to Divine Treasures, and they think they might be able to order it. They have the information. I gave them the information. I said, if somebody calls you after listening to Ashley, see if you can order it for them. Rather go to Divine Treasures than go to Amazon.
Sure.
But if you can't get it there, I do think Amazon is still carrying the book, because I got some information about it yesterday.
Well, highly recommend it. It's an encyclopedia. You just have it within your reach for reference.
All right. I want to remind everybody that we do have that Carathon coming up. And another thing I want to point out to you is the station's website, iowacatholicradio.com. If you go to that website, you can find our page on there, and you can have access to all of our past programs. So you can listen to, if you've missed something or heard somebody talk about something that you missed, you can go back and listen to those programs. And if you have any comments or questions on any of this, you can certainly contact me at deaconmike@q.com, and we'll try and respond to your comments or questions as we can. All right, I think that's about it for now. Let's close with our prayer to St. Michael. St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, thrust into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. That's it for today. For Gina and myself, thank you for listening. Join us next week for another edition of Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio. Until then, have a blessed and peaceful week.
Our freedom of conscience and religion is being challenged by laws and regulations imposed by secular society. Faith on Trial with Defender of the Faith, Deacon Mike Mano. Faith on Trial, Thursdays at 10 a.m. on Iowa Catholic Radio, iowacatholicradio.com, and the Iowa Catholic Radio app.
Support for Faith on Trial and Iowa Catholic Radio provided in part by Imogene Ingredients.